I'm an alcoholic. My name's Newton Pritchett. Thank you, Vic. I told Vic to not tell the truth, and he succeeded in doing that. This is a very hard act to follow. If they had told me I was coming after you guys, I would have been gone, because that was fantastic. I'm going to recommend to the area chair that you guys come to the assembly. Oh yeah, I had a tour. I sat in on a GSR report from the last assembly, and the GSR said it was really boring, and the delegate said the conference was dead. So that was their report. So you will definitely liven things up. So no, really, that was terrific. It is a privilege to get to come down here, and thank you, Vic, for inviting me. I don't know whether I'll have anything witty to say, but I'll try and keep it to the truth. Anyway, that's always something of a task for me. And let me just start out talking a little bit about history, because as Vic mentioned, I am the Area 51 archivist. Area 51 is North Carolina, for those of you who don't know. And I was going to tell you something about the history of AA in this vicinity, but you already have a pamphlet on the table that has a much better explanation than any one that we have in the archives. So I've taken one with me to add to the archives.
We just got it today.
Oh, well, I was telling Scott I should have gone around and collected them all, and so that I could just read from that, and you all would be very impressed by how much I knew. But really, it's terrific. Let me just. I could take a long time talking about AA history. It's my favorite subject, other than me, and but. You know, we're here because AA just celebrated their 80th birthday. We celebrated on June 10th because, as best as Dr. Bob and Bill could remember, Dr. Bob got sober on June 10th. It turns out he probably didn't get sober till June 17th, but who cares, right? That's details. He was sober as long as he could remember, and that's probably true for most of us. But so in 1935, it was just Bill and Dr. Bob, and they, after Dr. Bob went off to Atlantic City and got drunk, and that's the reason that we know it probably wasn't actually June 10th, because the convention was still going on June 10th, probably the 17th. Doesn't matter. They quickly realized that they needed other alcoholics to work with, and so after Dr. Bob went out and mended fences, which is what they called making amends, they began to look for another alcoholic to carry the message to, and the first one, at least the first one, didn't take. And they eventually wound up with Bill D., who was AA number 3, and his sobriety date was July 4th, 1935. So it took 3 weeks. 4 weeks, whatever that is. And it grew very slowly. It grew, there were just a couple more by the time that Bill went back to New York at the end of the summer. And by 1937, when he and Dr. Bob got back together in Akron in the fall of 1937, they counted noses, which is a Vermont expression, and they came up with 40 people. And that seemed to be a large enough number that they began to lift their head up a little bit from just staying sober one day at a time, and realizing that they had laid hold of something here, and it was a pretty remarkable moment in the history of alcoholism, because there were probably more people sober even in Akron and New York than had ever been sober in two places since man first crushed grapes, probably, at least alcoholics. And So, as Smitty, Dr. Bob's son, said, if it had been up to his father, AA would never have gotten outside the Akron city limits. And if it had been up to Bill, it would have been franchised all over the world. So between the two of them, and the other folks in the media, of course, because we do have group conscience, even though they didn't have the traditions back then, they came up with 3 ideas. Mainly Bill came up with 3 ideas and sold barely the majority in Akron. And the only one that they really bought was to write a book. The other was to start a chain of hospitals and to have paid missionaries. And all those things were going to take a lot of money. And so Bill's job was to go back to New York, which was the center of finance, even in the middle of deep recession, and raise the money to do all those things. And he tried hard. He got in through his sister's husband. He got in, had a link to the Rockefeller people, and when he did that, he thought he had it. He had hit gold, and he even influenced some of Rockefeller's close associates to support the idea. But as you may know, Rockefeller said, "Won't money spoil this thing?" And so he said he was strangely interested in it, but he didn't want to contribute a lot of money. He gave just a little bit in order to keep Dr. Bob from losing his house and to keep things going. But they formed this foundation. It was mostly Rockefeller's associates and a couple of alcoholics. And they started trying to raise money, and they were, again, spectacularly unsuccessful. But one thing they did was they started working on this book. And the book was eventually published on April 10th of 1939. So it took close to 2 years to get it written and published. And there's a whole talk on all the things that happened, got in the way, and turned out to be wonderful opportunities and all that sort of thing. And I won't go through all those with you here. But the book was published in 1939. And Alcoholics Anonymous in North Carolina can trace its roots to the publication of the Big Book in 1939, because there was a guy who was in the federal prison in Lexington, Kentucky, by the name of Dr. Tom M., who was the son of a prominent physician in Shelby. He was obviously a physician as well, who, in addition to his alcoholism, was a morphine addict. And he was in the narcotics farm in Lexington to take what they called the cure. And while he was there, he came upon a first edition of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that they had sent out to all the public health agencies. And he read it, and it changed his life. And when he was ready to get out, he contacted the AA office in New York by mail and expressed interest in finding an AA group near his home in Shelby. And this is 1939, and they wrote back and said, "It's wonderful that you've gotten sober, but the nearest group to you is in Richmond, Virginia," which is a fur piece from Shelby, North Carolina. And those of you who have read AA and Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers know that in Richmond at that time they were drinking beer because they didn't think that was really alcohol. So it might not have worked out too well if he'd driven all the way up to Richmond anyway. But again, God working in strange ways. So they sent him from New York. They sent him 6 pamphlets and encouraged him to form a group. And he formed the first AA meeting of AA in North Carolina in his office in Shelby, and reported back to the office in New York. And by all accounts, they were thrilled, because this was the first recorded instance of an AA meeting being started without personal contact with another alcoholic. It had just from the book and the help that they got from the office. So according to the records at GSO, the Shelby Group first appeared in the Eastern U.S. Directory of AA groups in June of 1941 and was officially registered on December 18th, 1941. An article submitted to the August 1945 Grapevine written by a member of the group stated that by 1945 the Shelby Group boasted 40 solid members, club rooms in an uptown hotel where they had the usual club furnishings, lockers, showers, piano, radio, pool table, reading room, and a seating capacity of 125. So they were doing all right for themselves. But with help from the New York office and visits from traveling members, including Bill W. himself, and a guy who had moved down there from New Jersey, a guy named Dave Ray. Dave was a traveling salesman, and Dave carried the message all around that part of North Carolina and upstate South Carolina, and helped start groups in Gastonia and Charlotte and Asheville, and apparently helped start the Hamlet group. The history that we have of the Hamlet group says that there was, which is also in District 52, says that Dave attended their group fairly frequently on Thursday nights. It still meets on Thursday nights, I guess. So at that point, I was going to go into a long history of AA in this vicinity, but you already have a better history than we have in our office, so I'll just tell you that since this is all about me, I'm from Raleigh, and the beginnings of AA in Raleigh go back to 1947, where there was an informational meeting at the courthouse. Apparently somebody had gone over to a convention in Charlotte and come back with the idea, and they put an ad in the newspaper, and anyone interested in having Alcoholics Anonymous in Raleigh, and had several speakers, a lawyer from Fayetteville, a salesman from Greensboro, and an author from Chapel Hill. And the author from Chapel Hill began holding meetings in his basement for a while and inviting folks from Raleigh to attend. So the first AA group in Raleigh was listed in the AA directory in 1947. It met in the Scout Hut on Horn Street, which is just outside of downtown, before finally going to the First Presbyterian Church, where the group is now called the Downtown Group. But the second group in Raleigh began in 1950, and this was the West Raleigh group on St. Mary Street. They met over a Chinese restaurant, and it was nicknamed the Ho Choi Group because of the name of the restaurant. And legend has it that this group split or that a new group split from that group and became the Hayes-Barton group. Because in order to avoid serious identity problem, this group moved to the more respectable address of St. Mary's Group and became the St. Mary's Group. And they also had a few exclusionary rules because we didn't have the third tradition back then. Members wanted to get honest about their lives and stay sober, but they felt that the presence of wives and husbands, an interruption caused by latecomers, and a lack of congeniality from the Boylan Bridge drunks and winos mitigated their chances of recovery. So they imposed a few rules like no spouses and imposition of fines on anyone arriving late at the meeting. And so in 1951, they became the Hayes-Barton Group. They met in what to most AAs was apparent luxury. The windows opened onto Oberlin Road, and there was a long conference table with handsomely upholstered captain's chairs all over a beautiful oriental rug. Other local AAs nicknamed the Hayes-Barton Group the Rug Group because it was the only group in town that had a rug on the floor. So that was in 1951, and 30 years later, To my eternal gratitude, Alcoholics Anonymous are still meeting in that room. And when I hit my bottom, that's where I picked up my white chip on April 10th of 1981. And so far, it's the last drink that I've had. So I'll fill in a little bit of the details of how I got here, what I was like, what happened, and hopefully save a little bit of time to talk about what I'm like now, because I usually don't get around to that. And it's important, I think. At least it is to me. But I grew up in Raleigh. I grew up a block and a half from that, where that meeting place was. Of course, I didn't know it was an AA meeting. But I was a junior. Senior was a doctor, and it was always assumed that I was going to become a doctor from the time I was 5 years old. And I just never questioned that. That was always what I was supposed to do. And I grew up the youngest of 3 kids, and I had everything that I needed and just about everything that I wanted. And I was fairly happy until I was about 5 years old, as far as I remember. The reason I say that is because when I was 5, I was in kindergarten, and I persuaded my mother to invite this little girl over after school, and she came over, and I was so embarrassed or shy, I guess, that I hid under the table the whole afternoon that she was there, and my mother had to entertain her. And if I could have just had a couple of drinks, I would have been, I could have had that ease and comfort that I later would find in alcohol. But I didn't have any idea that that was a possibility at that time. So the rest of my time growing up, I was a loner. There was no alcoholism in my family, although I learned after my father passed away many years later that he was an adult child of an alcoholic. That's how big of a secret that was in our family. And he carried it. I mean, he carried the attitude and outlook on, and I picked it up. And though they would never have thought it to be the case, we had a very dysfunctional family, and I was there. I later went to a skit, not as anywhere near as good as this one, but that was put on in a treatment center about a dysfunctional family, and there are basic roles that kids take on in dysfunctional families. And my oldest sister was the rebel, and my middle sister was the hero, the heroine, and I was the ghost. And that's how I went through my early life, getting away with everything I could. And my oldest sister was the lightning rod, and my middle sister got a lot of the praise, and I just sat in the background and did what I wanted to, and didn't get caught, and was sort of had this image of this goody two-shoes, and was really not all that good. So I had this persona that the Big Book talks about. It we have this image that we like other people to see, and that was true of me from as far back as I can remember, which wasn't me. And it creates a lot of tension within, I've figured out. And that a lot of that tension was released when I found alcohol. At that point, I could come out and play, and didn't have to be, I didn't think, the goody two-shoes, and could be the life of the party. And I enjoyed that role for as long as I could. I didn't discover alcohol until my freshman year in college. We had I went to Duke, and at that time, because I was supposed to be a doctor. That's why I went to Duke. And we had a terrible football team. I mean, I used to say that anybody who went to Duke would become an alcoholic watching those football games, because you had to get drunk to sit through those things. And we had a keg party after a football game one time, and this friend of mine challenged me to a chugging contest. And I just had a few sips of my father would have an occasional drink, and I would have a few sips of it occasionally, but not enough to have an effect. And my friend challenged me to this chugging contest, and if you challenged me to do anything, I would have accepted it. It didn't matter what it was, because I felt so much less than. I always had to prove myself to be the best. So he challenged me to a chugging contest. I said, sure, what do you do? He said, take this plastic cup and drink it. And I did. And I tilted it back, and he threw his over his shoulder. And he said, okay, you won. Now let's go again. And same thing. And within a very short time, a minute maybe, what happened to me is what makes me an alcoholic. To me, it's not all the throwing up and the passing out and the DUIs and the arrests and the fights and all those things that just serve to get our attention. What happened is that it changed the world for me. And best analogy I've ever come up with is like when we were growing up, we got a color TV, and the only color program that was on was Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. And it started out in black and white, and a few seconds into it, Tinkerbell or somebody would come on and go, zing! And it was color. And it was, whoa, man, that's great. And that's what those two beers did for me. It changed the whole world. I knew that I had been born with an alcohol deficiency immediately. And what it was is that was my higher power. Now, if you'd said that to me, I wouldn't even comprehended what you were talking about. Looking back on it, that's what I could see, that was a power that I had searched for through 18 years. And what it allowed me to do is come out and play. There was a gorgeous gal there whose name was Jeannie. Half the freshman dorm dreamt of Jeannie. And she was the girlfriend of the resident assistant. You know, she was a junior, she was off limits. And but after those two beers, Jeannie was lucky to get to dance with me. I mean, I was the life of the party. I was a lot of fun, and I had a great time. I didn't suffer any negative consequences. I didn't get punched out by her boyfriend, or I didn't throw up or pass out or any of those things that would become commonplace. And I couldn't wait to do it again. And I did. I did it a lot. And my grades reflected it. I went from an A- to a C+ average from first to second semester. And I began missing classes. And I gave up being a doctor, which I planned to do, because it interfered with my new social life, which was just going and drinking. I wasn't out dating Jeannie. I was just going to the bar and drinking. And I also wasn't first in the class anymore. In high school, I'd been first in my chemistry class, and it was a long time in AA before I could look back and see that was a factor in it. I was just another person in the class, and I couldn't handle that. And the same thing happened with golf. I was supposed to be on the golf team, and the coach expected us to be out practicing, and that interfered with my new social schedule, and so I quit. And I've been playing golf since I was 5, and I had been good at it, but in college I was just another bozo on the golf team, and my ego couldn't stand it, so I quit. And rocked along for a couple of years in school, and eventually decided, because I was looking at what I was going to do when I got out, decided I would become a lawyer. And just mostly because I could stay in school for a while longer. I didn't like lawyers. I didn't like law. What I wanted to do is go up to Washington and work on Capitol Hill and run your lives. Because I'm good at running people's lives. I figured that out, or at least I think I'm good at running people's lives, which is much more dangerous. So that's what I started working towards, and I started spending summers up on Capitol Hill in Washington. And if you're a budding alcoholic, there is no better place to be than, at least that I know of, than Capitol Hill, because there's a reception every night, at least, and if you're at all good chameleon like I was, you can go from being on Senator Kennedy's staff one night to Senator Helms' staff the next night, to the House Education and Labor Committee staff the next night, to the Senate Armed Forces Committee staff the next night, and nobody ever questioned it. So, I drank for free, and I drank a lot for free. And I thought that was it. I mean, I thought that was, like I said, I thought I had found my place. I kept looking for my place. I did a lot of geographical cures, thinking when I get there, things are going to be okay. I'm going to fit in. Because I never felt like I fit in. I just always felt different. So after a few drinks there, I could feel at home. But when I would get back to school, I was then in law school. When I get back to school, and I was starting to have a lot of the negative effects of alcoholism, like hangovers and worshiping that porcelain throne in the morning, and in fact mistaking the bathroom for the closet more than once, and passing out and not getting my work done, and law school was kind of sadistic for a guy like me, because you would go and the professor would get up behind one of these podiums like this and point and say, "Kathy, tell me about Smith versus Jones," and Kathy stand up and start telling him until Kathy got an answer wrong, and then the professor would humiliate you and go on to the next person. That was a Socratic method, at least to me. Now, some people didn't mind it, so apparently it was something I brought to the party, but it got to be just a lot easier not to go to class. So I tended not to go to class, and then I would feel guilty because I didn't go, and I'd have to drink and to overcome the guilt and shame of not going. And then I discovered better living through chemistry, and so because I was suffering a lot from the physical effects of alcohol consumption, and so I tried to find other things that would make me feel that way without paying the consequences, and I never did find the right. I'm very grateful that I didn't find some of the things that are around today. The one stuff I did just made me one with the sofa, and that was the opposite of where I was trying to go. So I eventually could give those things up without too much trouble. But I never tried to give up alcohol before I got to AA. It never occurred to me that was the problem. I tried a lot of different ways to control and enjoy my drinking. I tried, I made up rules about if I don't drink in the morning, then I don't have a problem. And then I said, well, if you just keep drinking all night, then it doesn't really count as drinking in the morning. And if I made it to, if I got my contacts out before I fell asleep, then it didn't count as passing out. Yeah, but then if you just fall down on the floor, you're not going to get your contacts out. So, I just had all kinds of little things along the way. So I obviously thought that there was a problem, but I was just in denial, I guess. Alcohol was too important to me to give up, and I just never. I wasn't under a bridge, and I was supposed to be, I was in school. I wasn't going to class, but I was in school. So anyway, I had lots of reasons why I couldn't have a problem. But it catches up, it caught up with me. And I started getting incomplete, and I was supposed to graduate, and my father promised me a sports car that my sister had when she was younger, and I really wanted, and I thought, yeah, if I had this sports car, then things will be great. And, so he offered to buy it for me for graduation, and I just forgot to tell him I wasn't graduating. And, he had to find out. I never did tell. He had to find out from a father of a friend of mine in law school that I was not going to graduate, and there were some unhappy times in the Pritchett household for a while, but I had my car. So, that was kind of the way I went through life. It was, sorry that you're angry at me, but, it's kind of those athletes' press conferences type of events, Sorry if you got angry at me, but anyway. So this is like 1980, summer of 1980. I again went up to Washington to work at my congressman's office. Came back, it was a re-election year. He was in the House of Representatives, so they had to run for election every 2 years. So as soon as they finished getting elected, they had to start running for re-election. So I was working in the campaign and I was living in Raleigh with my parents and going to school in Chapel Hill, or supposed to be going to school in Chapel Hill. And his office was in the Research Triangle Park, which is about halfway. And so I started stopping off in the office to see what I could do to contribute to the campaign. And lo and behold, he'd hired a new assistant, a woman named Victoria, who she was a receptionist, but she also did constituent services. And I walked in and I met her, and I fell head over heels in love. It was love at first sight, and I found out that that's probably as dangerous as having a large alcohol tolerance. Love at first sight was, for me, and I don't mean to spoil anybody's fairy tale, but for me, it was codependency right away. And this was a person this was something, somebody else, something else outside of me who was going to make me feel okay. And it worked wonders for a while. Worked wonders for me for a while. I was walking on air for a while. And then I got hospitalized for the third or fourth time within a couple of years with this strange liver disorder that they couldn't figure out what was causing it. And so anyway, they gave me all these tests. They gave me a spinal tap. I had to develop these terrible headaches. Got out on her birthday, September 16th, 1980, went to the wine store in North Raleigh, a very expensive wine store, spent a lot of my parents' money buying her this magnum of French champagne. A magnum of champagne's like that big. It's huge. And kind of walking wounded, went over to her place and delivered this bottle of champagne to her on her birthday. And she said, you're so nice. I can't believe you would do that. Getting out of the hospital and doing that. But I have to tell you that I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been sober since July 9th. This was September 16th, so 2 months. And I can't drink that. And I said, I can't, that's such a shame. I don't want you to be tempted, so let me drink this for you. Because that was nothing if not gallant. And so I did. And passed out on her sofa, and I think she knew that she had her first 12th step opportunity. Passed out on her sofa that night. So we dated for a couple of months, and she was going to meetings every night. She was doing what a newcomer in AA is supposed to do. And And I was watching her life get better. I mean, she was holding down a job and taking care of her daughter. She had a daughter from first marriage, and things were going well. But she was leaving every night, and I was getting really jealous about where she was going. And she was going to these AA meetings, and I'd ask her who was there, and she said, "I can't tell you." And I'd, well, what did you talk about? I can't tell you that either. And what did you do after? I can't tell you that. And so, for no better reason than just to check out who she was talking to and what she was doing at these things, I badgered her into going to my first AA meeting. And it was at that Hayes Barton group, as luck would have it, on the day after Thanksgiving, 1980. And they say if you're an alcoholic and you go to enough of these meetings, somebody will get behind one of these podiums and tell your story. And it happened to me the very first meeting I ever went to. It was a guy named Bryant W. was speaking. He also was an attorney. He did a lot of drinking in law school. He got in a lot of trouble. And I thought, this is too much of a coincidence. This is like somebody has set me up. Victoria has set me up for this. But something happened to him at about 10 minutes to 9 that hadn't happened to me yet, and I breathed a sigh of relief and realized I was not an alcoholic. And but I started going to Al-Anon, and Al-Anon is a wonderful program. It has since saved my life, but it is for people who've been affected by someone else's drinking. And at that point, I was the only person whose drinking was affecting me, and so I was not ready for Al-Anon, but started going to open AA meetings as well. And to make a long story short, over the next 4.5 months, it got worser and worser, and there's no such word as worser unless you're an alcoholic. And if you're an alcoholic, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to give you the specifics. My mother, who was my person who I went to when I had a problem, my enabler, if you want to call it that, finally said, it's killing me to watch you kill yourself. I can't be involved anymore. You're on your own. And that was in January, and in February, Victoria said basically the same thing. And then I was alone. I was desperately alone. I had nobody, no friends, no one to talk to. I had burned all the bridges, and life was miserable. And I started planning how I was going to kill myself. And what I decided was I was going to take that sports car and get it up to 100 miles an hour, which would have been very easy, and slam it into a bridge abutment on the way over to Chapel Hill. And I had picked out the spot, and they put a little cross and the flowers there like somebody does for people who died at places like that, and then they'd all be sorry. And alcoholics always have a good plan A and a lousy plan B, and I didn't even think about I won't be around to appreciate that they're sorry, just that they'll be sorry. And so in April 9th, Victoria was picking up her 9-month chip at what was then the biggest meeting in Raleigh, and it was a speaker meeting. And after the speaker meeting, I congratulated her, and she said, why don't you just get up and pick up a white chip? You don't have to say you're an alcoholic. Just maybe it would help. What have you got to lose? And I was deeply offended for you, not for me. I was offended for you because I really come to respect you people who really needed this program, and it would have been dishonest for me to get up and pick up a white chip because I had lots of problems. I was depressed. I thought I had multiple personalities. I was suicidal. But alcoholism was not my problem. Alcohol was the only thing that was keeping things at all together. And but for whatever reason, I didn't drink for the next 24 hours, and I went to a meeting at the Hayes Barton group on the next night, April 10th, 81. Same guy I was telling a story who'd been telling a story the night before at this other group, and I realized you guys needed a program chair because I was there to be entertained, and I really needed to be entertained because I was suicidal, and I couldn't wait for this meeting to end so I could get drunk and screw up the courage to carry out my plan to kill myself. And sitting in that AA meeting, I had a moment of clarity, and I believe now that it came from a God of my understanding, because I was not capable of forming the idea that if the only way I could stand this pain that I was in was to get drunk and hopefully kill myself, maybe alcohol had some power over me, and maybe that meant I was powerless over it, or something like that. My thinking wasn't real clear, but it was enough so that alcohol switched in my head from being the solution to the problem. And so this sweet little old lady who was probably there in 1951 when the group started got up and said, if you're at the end of the meeting, and said, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and want to join Alcoholics Anonymous, come up here and pick up a white chip. And I was sitting way in the back, and I made that long walk up. Felt like the last mile to me, and maybe it was. Got that white chip, was surrounded by the men of Alcoholics Anonymous who told me I never had to be alone again. And to somebody who felt like I was waiting to be beamed up to the mothership, when people told me I never had to be alone again, that was manna from heaven to me. That was I still get choked up thinking about that. That was incredible. A guy sitting next to me had picked up a white chip the night before at a different group than the one I'd been at. His name was Charles. We made fast friends. He had 24 hours and he was giving it away. Thank God, because he didn't let me out of his sight. He was unencumbered with spouse at the time, and I didn't have anybody. And so we spent a lot of time together in those early days, and before meetings and after meetings, and sitting up late at night watching baseball games, and just talking about what was going on in our lives, talking about what was going on in AA to us, what little we understood. And I started to make a friend, and the next night I went to my first closed meeting. There was a guy who was chairing the meeting. His name was Tim. He spoke like this because he was from Minnesota. And we went around the room and introduced ourselves. And came to me and I said, I'm an alcoholic. named Newton. It stuck right there. And I was shaking and sweating. And I knew I had to have help. And I'd heard enough from these meetings that I'd gone to, open meetings, that there was something called a sponsor, and that seemed to be really important to you people. And so after the meeting, I asked Tim to be my sponsor, and I got lucky. It is, to me, a luck. It could have been somebody who didn't know what they were doing. Tim was not that. He was, he was chairing a meeting, for one thing. I guess that's indication one. But he gave me my first service job. He said, "You see those ashtrays right there? Take them and wash them." And I didn't even smoke at the time, so I picked up these ashtrays and went back to the sink to wash them. Some of them had bean bags on the bottom of them, and I was flummoxed because I couldn't put the thing under the faucet. And I had to ask the guy next to me, "What do you do?" And he said, "Just take the rag and put it under the water and wipe them out." Wow, man, this is great. You guys know everything. But I had to ask. That was the first time I remember asking for help. And then I asked Tim for a lot of help. Tim, we spent a lot of time together. God bless him. He's down in Tampa now. But still sober. We used to go to lunch together. He called it wining and dining. I whined and he dined, and I needed that. I needed to get that poison out. I needed it, because otherwise I was going to drink. And I drank. That's what I drank over. I drank all over those broken relationships that were very painful. So I found out I didn't have to drink. Tim started talking about God of my understanding. I didn't tell you that I used to sit while I was drinking, and those afternoons I was supposed to be in class, I'd be watching TV, and there was Jim and Tammy Faye were on in the afternoons then, and I used to drink and feel sorry for all those people who believed in God, or said they did, and that was my idea of religion. And Tim told me that I could choose my own conception of God, and it just opened that door just a smidgen, just enough for a closed-minded egomaniac like me to be able to squeeze through. And because that was a tough thing. I remember him saying, die in your own vomit or put your life on a spiritual basis. You choose. And that was a tough choice. I mean, I really wasn't. It sounds crazy, but I guess it is crazy. But it was absolutely true to me. So, third step, I thought I had to become a saint to do it, so I delayed a lot on that. Plus, I knew what came after 3. So, and then Tim had to move away for a job transfer, and he told me I had to get a new sponsor and how to do that. And I took his advice, thank God. Did a 4th step. Couldn't figure out what the diagram in the big book was talking about. Didn't know Mr. Brown. Didn't have an employer. Didn't have a wife. None of that applied to me. So I answered all the questions in the 12 and 12, and it's probably a very valid way of doing a 4th step, but for me, that was just an awful lot of rationalization, an awful lot of explanation of my conduct, and I completely missed the pattern of my behavior. So I thought every situation was different. 5th step, my new sponsor, we've made an appointment. I went there with this couple of legal pads of writing. And after he listened for a little while, he started telling me some things about himself. And I came away from there thinking, I have a real sick son of a gun for a sponsor. And I completely missed it. And I got some of the relief, I guess, of getting rid of a few of those things. But those 2 or 3 things I was going to the grave with, I didn't manage to get to. 6 and 7 were just a couple of paragraphs in the big book that didn't take long. 8 and 9, I did the amends that were easy. Meanwhile, I got married against sponsor's advice to Victoria. Tried to convince my sponsor that I got out of law school, finally passed out of law school, and tried to convince my sponsor that if I took the bar exam, I'd get drunk. And he solved my employment problem. He said, appears to me you've been trained to be a lawyer, maybe you ought to be a lawyer. And nobody explained it to me like that before. I was always looking for what I was going to do with my life, and that's what I did. I took the bar exam and passed it, and became a lawyer, got a job, just kept that same job in the same place for almost 31 years. Thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. My wife and I had 2 kids, and I had a job, wife, kids, house, cars, blah, 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 busy life. Just don't have time to go to all those AA meetings anymore, And I'm not drinking, so get off my back. Don't give me a hard time. I'm not drinking. I'm not fighting taking a drink. I'm doing fine, thank you. I don't need to go. Listen to those same old people say that same old stuff all the time. That's going to sound bad on the tape. So I quit going. So did Victoria. We both quit going. Fast forward for nearly 10 years. I'm miserable. She's miserable. We're locked in codependent heck. Neither one going to meetings. Got a child with special needs. Life is really bad. I mean, it's gotten really uncomfortable to me. And she happened to pick up the drink that had my name on it. I could have just as easily been me. But she drank first. And I got to see what happens when an alcoholic goes back to drinking. And I always thought that when they told you it's quickly back to worse than it was before, I thought, it can't be. That's not possible. It's possible. It is not only possible, it is true. I got to see that. I got to see it up close and personal. I got to see, and that's why I say Al-Anon saved my life, because I became desperate enough to go back to Al-Anon when I was marking bottles and hiding car keys and bailing out of jail and all that kind of stuff. So I got back. She went to treatment. Her counselor interviewed me, asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm doing great, except I got a job, a family, a house, blah, 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 and my wife is out here playing volleyball for 28 days in your treatment center, but other than that, I'm doing just fine. And she said, "Phew, sounds like you got a resentment. You need to go to AA meeting, back to AA meetings." I said, "You don't understand. Didn't you just hear what my problems are? It's not a lack of AA." She said, that's your program. Go to an AA meeting. Find an AA meeting that you can go to. Well, I looked at the meeting directory, and lo and behold, there was a meeting that met at lunchtime a block away from my office. And I crawled back to Alcoholics Anonymous, not having had a drink for nearly 10 years and just miserable. So my problem is not really alcohol. Alcohol is a symptom of my problem. My problem is selfishness and self-centeredness. And I got down to it. I got a sponsor who took me back through the steps. I wrote a fourth step the way it's described in the book. I could understand it. I was in enough pain to understand it then. And I did a fifth step, and I got those things out that I was going to go to the grave with. I saw my pattern of behavior, which was in every situation, I just tried to have it my way. I just tried to be happy. And if you would cooperate, then I'd be happy. But, I'm a benevolent dictator. I wanted you to be happy too, but I wanted to be happy mostly. Spent a year on step 6 and 7. Seemed a little long to me for 2 or 3 paragraphs in the big book, but that's what he told me to do, and it saved my life. During that time, I had a spiritual experience. My wife had gotten out of treatment. I had to go to St. Louis to a hearing early one morning for work, and I got up and went to our home office. She was a writer, and when she was sober, and in looking for stuff that I had to take to the hearing, I discovered something that she didn't share my goal of being married, I guess, and or not to me anyway, and I was crushed because this is after doing that 4th and 5th step and working on 6 and 7, and I was trying to be a loving and giving husband and father, and I thought this is what happens when you try and put your life on a spiritual basis. You get nice guys finish last, to put it mildly. And but I had to get on this plane. I was sobbing. This was in 1992. If it was in 2002, they wouldn't have let me on a plane. I'm sure I would have met some profile of this is somebody who's dangerous. But I got on that plane, and at 30,000 feet, I felt a loving God. I felt the hands of God that loved and cared for me and protected me. And from that moment on, I knew that my job here was to be the best channel of that love that I could be to his other kids. It didn't matter the circumstances of life didn't matter whether I was a lawyer or not, or married or not, or any of those things. That's just the circumstances. The job as a child of God was the same. And when I can keep that in mind, I'm happy, regardless of what the circumstances are. And I wish I could keep that in mind all the time, but I don't. I get caught up into thinking that happiness comes from getting what I want, rather than wanting what I have. And but it did help to change my attitude. And I have come to believe that everybody has a gift to bring to Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody gets here by accident, and everybody who gets here has a gift to bring. And for me, if I'm not here, I can't deliver the gift that I'm to bring to you. And gifts also have to be received. So you have to be here to receive what gift I have to bring. And then I am doing my purpose. I am doing God's will. I don't have to worry about whether I turn right or left out of the parking lot. That's not important. I do have a gift, and I've tried to find that. I've been blessed to have jobs in service. I get to sponsor guys. I get to be service sponsees to guys and gals, service sponsor. And it's an incredible experience. My son just got married last weekend, and on the same weekend, a gal who is a service sponsee of mine got married, not to him, to somebody else. And a longtime recovery sponsee picked up 16 years last weekend. So, I mean, I have a blessed life. I get to live in the joy if I just choose to look for it. So now I just try and admire the view. And that's all I got. Thank you very much, Vic.